Good afternoon, Randy Smith here at the South Florida Water Management District headquarters in the Emergency Operations Center, where we're going to run through with John Mitnick, our chief engineer, the situation in the district, starting just a little bit north of Lake Okeechobee, and this will include what impacts that we've seen from Hurricane Irma, what the district is doing, and a conditions report on what we've got with the Water Management District flood control system. So John, let's start north of Lake Okeechobee here and work our way down.
Certainly. So as a result of Hurricane Irma, we've had widespread rainfall throughout the entire district. Right now our meteorologists tell us that we're pushing almost 7 inches average over the entire 16 counties that the Water Management District covers. So it's looking up here in the Kissimmee River, upper chain of lakes area, around Lake Kissimmee, Lake Toho, that neck of the woods. They've probably gotten about 6 to 8 inches of rainfall from the hurricane itself. So right now a lot of those lakes are above their regulation schedules. We're starting to look to move some of that water down into Lake Kissimmee and eventually transition it down through the Kissimmee River.
And that's going to make its way ultimately into Lake Okeechobee.
Correct. As a result of just the direct rainfall that happened along the Kissimmee River, there's about 9,000 cubic feet per second of water moving into Lake Okeechobee just from the river by itself.
And then let's go to the east, and surprisingly, St. Lucie, Fort Pierce really saw, I think, 18 to 19 inches of rainfall.
Yeah, in talking to our meteorologist earlier this morning, they never would have guessed that you would have had a localized downpour right there around the Fort Pierce area from this hurricane that came up the west coast. They had predicted large amounts of rainfall over the southern portions of the district, rainfall up here, but not as much as they actually received. So they had roughly 12 to 15 inches of a localized downpour right around Fort Pierce. Our 3 canals, the C25, 24, and 23 canals, have been operating, of course, since the hurricane. We had those levels pulled down. They continue to remain down, and all 3 of those structures are operating at their maximum capacities right now. Just what we're waiting for is a lot of that water to come out of the streets, come out of the swales in front of your people's houses, and get into the secondary system, and the secondary system delivers it to our primary canal so it can come out to tide here.
And looking at Lake Okeechobee, which was relatively low for this time of year to start with, there was a lot of concern ahead of this about the dike and what might happen if water went over the dike with the slosh effect. And I have not heard of any major issues, certainly with the dike or with it going over the dike.
No, we've been in close contact and coordination with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who's responsible for the management of the Herbert Hoover Dike. They were actively monitoring the system throughout this entire event, and they are currently going around and doing the inspections of the dike. And so far, what they've conveyed to us, they haven't identified any areas of concern as they continue to work their way around it and complete their inspections.
So we move over into Palm Beach County, where I think we were spared a little bit with the flooding. Certainly we got the wind, but with the flooding.
Yeah, we really were. Palm Beach County, while we had a fair amount of rain in Palm Beach County, it wasn't nearly on the order of magnitude at some of the other areas, especially Miami-Dade County and what they saw. So Palm Beach County is looking pretty good over here in the coastal areas. That water is continuing to run off and move out to tide.
And we move to the west, and Clewiston is one of the areas of concern. We had Miami-Dade, Big Cypress Basin, and Clewiston. Give us what the situation is in this area.
Yeah, currently right now in the area just south of Lake Okeechobee, those canal levels we've been keeping them down in preparation for the storm. We're moving that water into our new storage feature right here, the A1 flow equalization basin that just came online about a year ago. So it's a new storage feature that was constructed to be able to take some of that water. And what we're seeing now is the operations that we're employing are primarily to protect the communities of Belglade, South Bay, Pahokee, and Clewiston, and trying to get that water out of their streets, out of their city, and move it through the system.
So what we have going on, this is family people protection that
Correct.
we're doing here.
So what we have going on right now for this area is we're pulling water both south and north to try to get it out of the cities.
And then we can move down into the water conservation areas, and you probably know that in Water Conservation Area 3, we've been under emergency operations there since really the 1st of June. This is the area that received so much rainfall that its water levels have been so high that it's affecting wildlife, the plants, the tree islands. And even though we had all kinds of measures trying to get the water levels down under the emergency, we really did get a setback with this rainfall.
Correct. All three of the water conservation areas, area 1, 2, and 3, they received on the order of 6 to 8 inches of direct rainfall. So in the case of conservation area 3A, which was already higher than what we want, that 6 inches to 8 inches is not going to do us any favors, so to speak. In addition to that, then you have all the areas to the north that need to start draining down through the system.
Miami-Dade did have quite a bit of water in the streets that I saw, but we have structures that work very well down here. We did have calls a little bit ahead of the storm down in the Pinecrest and Palmetto Bay area regarding some of the operations of our coastal structures. And they were operated the way they were for a reason.
Correct. So prior to the storm, everybody remembers some of the storm tracks had the storm coming up the east coast, and then as the day moved on, it slowly progressed over to the west coast. Some of the projections that we were receiving from the National Weather Service as far as storm surge is concerned showed a storm surge coming up through this area on the lower east coast on the order of 12 to 14 feet. So what will happen for some of these water control structures here in southern Miami-Dade County is that water will literally come over top of the structure, come around the structure, and just make its way inland. So what we do in those cases, you can typically expect that you're going to lose commercial power. You're going to lose power to that site. You're not going to be able to control that water control structure without that power. So we have generators at each one of those sites. But in dealing with a storm surge of that magnitude, that will often short out the generator because it'll get inside the generator building, cause the generator malfunction, and then you have no power at the site whatsoever.
So you have no power when the storm is passing or after it's passed. Your gates or water control structures that we're talking about that open and close are rendered useless.
Correct. So as I was saying, how the track of the storm progressively started going east, we had new and updated projections for this area of a much lower storm surge. So once we got that information, we started going out and hitting some of those water control structures, especially the ones right there on the Miami River and the C4 Canal that serves the city of Sweetwater and some of the areas further to the west over here along Tamiami Trail, and started connecting the generators back up. So what you probably saw along the lower east coast here on some of these water control structures, you saw the gates out of the water. You saw the storm surge, although it wasn't as high as it was projected, nevertheless there was still a storm surge. And you saw that storm surge come up into the canal system. That was only a temporary basis until it subsided with an outgoing tide. There was still a surge, but you had the outgoing tide. And then having the gates open, although they lost their commercial power, we were able to still maintain control of the gates and let that water come back out of the system.
And at this point, there is no salt water in the canals down there.
Correct. But as we sit here, what is it, Monday afternoon today? All of those systems have drained. They're continuing to drain. Some of them have already gotten back down to their levels prior to the hurricane event. Others are still making their way down, but we're seeing a huge amount of progress in the levels right there along the coastal ridge. Some of them have even dropped a foot in the past 4 hours.
And as I mentioned earlier, Big Cypress, the Collier County area, was already had previous rainfalls that had water levels high. They were supposed to get a really high storm surge. Do you have a feel for how the Big Cypress Basin's flood control system is working now?
Yeah, of course, with the eye of the storm coming right over Marco Island up into this area, the Big Cypress Basin in Collier County has faced the largest challenge from this storm. They got some of the most rainfall directly attributed to the storm. They were already in a condition where they were recovering from a previous rainfall event about 2 weeks ago. So they had just caught up from that, and now they get hit with Hurricane Irma. So what's going on over here is there's a tremendous amount of water that is stacked up in the system right now. It's all trying to get out to the coast, and all of the coastal structures are wide open to their maximum capacities trying to let that water out. But they're going to be fighting this issue for days to come.
Well, that's an update of the situation that we have for what is 18,000 square miles in the South Florida Water Management District. We'll keep you updated as to what's going on in the field, what the water management is doing, and rest assured we're working 24/7 both in the field here at the operations at South Florida Water Management District headquarters, and we will continue to keep you posted.